All right, so I think we should start. I want to reintroduce myself. My name is Anna Roisman. I am the founder of Testmasters Academy, and my goal is to bring educational events to people who need them in software testing and QA community. Also, some of my deepest interest and focus is on leadership in that field. That's why I'm interested to bring together a community of leaders. I want to participate in growing those leaders and providing them with skills that needed in that direction, because I feel that software testing as a field, a craft, is something more than just sitting somewhere and kind of doing something at your computer. A lot of the job is to motivate others, give them more kind of directions, quality mindset. And I feel that because of that, coaching in software testing is something that is of interest of many. Today joining me are people who I gonna introduce one by one. And when I introduce you, please tell us about what you do and your experience with coaching. So we're gonna go, I see James. So let's start with James. James Bach.
Hi, I'm James Bach. I've written a couple of books, one about testing, another about education. And I'm an independent testing consultant based in Washington State. I offer coaching sessions for free on Skype as part of keeping my skills sharp. And so I have a special interest in coaching.
Thank you, James. Joshua.
Hello, I'm Joshua Gorospe. I work out of New York. I'm a senior test engineer, although I like being called a tester by trade. And basically, I've worked in small teams, large teams, and I have an ongoing interest in teaching, and I'm a constant learner and always diving into new things and learning new things as well. So coaching, I feel, is one of the most important skills to have as a tester diving into any project.
Thank you. And AJ.
Hi everyone, I'm Ajay Balamurugadas from Bangalore, India. I head the delivery at Capitol QA. I'm a hands-on tester, love learning, and I have a special interest in problem solving, especially after attending the problem solving leadership workshop with Jerry and Esther in 2016. Since then, I've solved many personal and professional problems with ease. More details at testwithajay.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aprajta.
Hi guys, I'm Aprajta, also referred as AP. I lead the bioinformatics software test team at Guardians Health. I've been working in the field of bioinformatics or biotechnology for the last 15-something years. Love working in this field, currently working on cancer detection. And I personally have, I think, not formally been coaching, but as a manager and just as colleague, have been coaching for years.
Thank you. And Bernie Berger.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bernie Berger. I'm a career software tester. My domain is primarily financial services and based in New York. And in terms of managing and leading teams, I feel that coaching is a natural extension of leadership. That's something that I've been doing for years and years. So, so that's who I am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So probably my first question is kind of an opening one. What do you consider coaching? There is so many activities. At some point I was attending Joanna Rossman class, and they give all participants kind of a spreadsheet with, like, there is 12 different roles, what we call coaching, but they all mean different things. So maybe we should start with what is coaching? So we'll start with James.
I think coaching is when somebody is doing a task, they're doing a job, and they want to do it better, or you want them to do it better, and you're in a position to insist that they do it better. But usually it's they want to do it better. And so in the context of them doing that task, you nudge them, you talk about what they're doing, you might get involved in what they're doing, or you might just talk about what they're doing, to nudge them into doing that better. So to me, it's distinct from training, but there's a real fuzzy line between training and coaching often slips into training. But the difference is that coaching presumes that the person is already doing the activity that they're being coached on, whether it's cooking, whether it's leadership, whatever it is, driving. To coach somebody is to help them do whatever they already are doing a little bit better.
Thank you. And Josh, what do you think coaching is?
I think coaching is giving someone the direction, and also trying to get them interested in what you're coaching them on. And as I was talking about earlier, is you show a person how to fish, you show them like that one time. You want to teach that person how to fish so they feed themselves for a lifetime. I think that coaching is just, it's something that it should be like you teach this person, it's only temporary. Coaching is something that you want to make sure this person is continuously learning on their own, if possible, and maybe they get passionate about it. A little bit of passion maybe ignites in them some sort of, I want to learn this little thing now. This is interesting. This is interesting. I want to keep going. I want to keep going. And maybe like James said earlier, it's like they'll come back and show me something cool that I didn't know about. Because I think that's part of it, is you want the person you're coaching, mentoring, to get excited and then say, Josh, I checked this thing out. Maybe you should check it out too. So,
Cool. Thank you. AJ, what do you think coaching is?
Coaching is to help someone who is already interested in learning, who already has the motivation to get better at a particular skill or a topic, and you give that person all the support that's possible. Not just directly about the skill, but anything and everything that will help them get better at that particular skill. Whereas I think training is more towards help them get better at that skill, and maybe not touch upon the surrounding areas or points too much.
Thank you. And Aprajta, what do you think coaching is?
So obviously everything that everybody else said, but I think one of the crucial parts about coaching is the soft skills associated with it, right? So a lot of the times coaching is, when I talk to people about coaching, they describe it as like in a room talking about stuff, but it's also understanding the person who's receiving the coaching, what they really require, not just from technical aspect, but from the soft skill aspect. What are the things that they need more motivation on or more direction on in order to get where they need to get, right? So that is also part of coaching. I focus more on that than the technical aspect of things.
Thank you. And Bernie, what do you think coaching is?
Yeah, I don't know if it came from sports or sports used the term from somewhere else, but like I think of it like, if you think of like baseball, American baseball, right? So you have a baseball coach. So what is the coach? And you have a team of coaches, right? So you have a batting coach, you have a pitching coach, you have a fielding coach, right? And so what do? They, they're professional baseball players, and you might think, well, what does a professional baseball player need a coach for? They're in the majors. They're already a pro, you know. But no, obviously they do need coaching because I guess it's not training because they already know how to play baseball, you know. But there are tips and tricks, and they're there to point out like minor, you know, let's say you're swinging the bat, hold the bat this way, not that way, and you're gonna hit the ball better, kind of thing. So if you kind of like transpose that idea of what a baseball coach does to a software testing, so it's observing what the person or the team is doing and offering suggestions, minor suggestions here and there that will either make the team work better together as a cohesive unit or improve the performance of each individual player or tester in this case.
Thank you, which is perfect. I think that this definition of coaching is really important because it's a personal thing. And it's your personality matched with the coachee personality, and some chemistry happens because you need to respond to exactly what this person is giving to you. You need to guide them along the way, but in an unobtrusive way.
Yeah.
And I would really like to get from some of you some of the techniques that you use when you coach. And I start with James.
Okay, here's a technique. And I learned this technique from Jerry Weinberg. And I don't normally quote people, but this is so important that I'm going to quote Jerry Weinberg on this. Follow the energy. There's no 3 words I can give you that is more useful than follow the energy. So in any coaching situation, you need to ask yourself, where is this person's energy going right now? What are they excited about doing? What do they want to talk about? What do they want to do? And it's so easy as a coach to get into a mode where you say, well, I think this person needs X right now. I want them to work on X when they want to work on Y. And so follow the energy means it's better to work on Y if that's where their energy is than to work on X, which is what you think they should want to do. Follow the energy. If you follow the energy, then everything's going to go better.
Thank you.
Rather than having somebody on a leash and dragging them along with you.
Thank you. And Josh, what do you think? Some of the techniques.
I have to definitely agree with what James just said. And my technique is I'm observing their body language, their reaction to whatever testing task I put in front of them. And I'm interested in, well, what do you think about this way of testing it? And I want them to come back with me, is there another way I could try it? And I want to see their creativity, but also I want to start them off slow. I've worked recently and in the past with people who are kind of new to testing and or are not quite as technical. And I always try to gauge what level of interest they're at right now, if they're irritated, if they're kind of like looking out the window. And I always try to make sure, maybe I should step back a little and look at what I'm talking about here. And okay, how about we work on this part of the task here? What do you think about it? And what can you tell me about it? I try to gauge the reactions. And I think it's very important to pay attention to the body language, the way that this person's demeanor is. And yeah, that's how I kind of ease my way into it. And I go from there.
Thank you. And Aprajta, what's your some of your techniques?
So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I found abstraction to be very useful. So what I mean by that is when you're talking to a person and if they're asking for feedback or coaching, a lot of times there's an elephant in the room and you're looking at the leg and they're looking at the trunk and you don't really realize there's an elephant. So my way of approaching the problem is to abstract it, to take it away from what they're trying to solve and take it to something which is common to understand or easy to understand. So for example, if you're trying to coach somebody on how to write a better test case, I would rather start with, okay, let's talk about testing a straw. How would you write a test case for a straw? Why do you need to write a test case for a straw? So on and so forth. And that helps them get away from the actual, whatever they're trying to solve at that time, and really look at it from a bigger perspective and an abstracted perspective and get better answers to it.
Thank you. And AJ, some of your techniques.
Build trust, confidence by making sure that they trust you, and then they share everything about the context. Because if they don't give you the complete picture, you're solving the wrong problem. So the first step for me is to ensure that both trust each other, the coach and the coachee, right? So I'll make sure that the first step, as I told, is to ensure that both trust each other, and then it takes from there.
Okay. And Bernie, what's some of your techniques?
Yeah. So I kind of feel like, at least in my experience, that coaching comes naturally. It's a natural expression of leadership, right? So let's say, James mentioned this earlier. So I've had a team, right? And so I'd let them do their work, and as I'm observing their work, and I will, chime in when necessary with a, like a pointed question that will start getting conversations going in a direction that brings the team dynamic to a better, higher level of productivity. So kind of like what I mean is hang back, let things develop, and then zoom in with a correction, or with like a little little tidbit that's going to propel the team going forward.
Thank you. And since we're going to talk about coaching in testing, and testing is a kind of big and fuzzy topic. So I would like to ask the next question is, how do you exactly coach testing? And I will start with James. I know it's a philosophical question, so I would love to hear your opinions.
Well, all of my coaching is what I call skill-based coaching, which is to say that it's possible to coach people on something that you don't know how to do, but I'm not comfortable with that. I like to be very good at the thing that I'm coaching somebody on, which I think is what happens in baseball, as Bernie was talking about. The people who do the coaching know a lot about baseball. It's not just general life coaching. And so for me, all of my confidence as a coach comes from the fact that I study testing and know a lot about testing. And so one of my methods is to take people to basic principles to make sure that all of what they do, like creating test cases or whatever, comes out of a deep understanding of testing. And so one of the methods I do for that is I'll focus in on a particular word that they're using, and I will say, tell me what that word means. So you just said, this is a test. Like, help me understand, what do you mean when you say test? And usually people aren't used to talking about definitions. Usually they get tongue-tied and they stumble on that. And then what I try to do is help them feel okay about that by doing a technique called normalizing. I say it's normal. It is normal to not be able to say what you mean by the word tests. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It doesn't mean that you're incompetent. What it means is you may have an intuitive understanding that because nobody is asking you every day what your words mean, you're just not practiced at answering these questions. And because you're not practiced at this, you kind of feel dopey right now, but that's an illusion. So let's work through this. And what I try to get them to understand is that when you do practice this, you get better at it. And as you get better, you also feel more like a testing expert because you feel like, well, I can actually say what I mean when I say test case. And not everybody can do that, but I can do it because James Bach keeps drilling me on that sort of thing. And so I'm ready for this. I'm ready to answer my own questions to myself about what do I mean when I use a certain word. And if anyone comes to me, I'll be ready. And then that starts creating a sense of I'm not just going through the motions, but I understand what testing is and know what I'm doing.
Thank you. And Josh, how do you coach testing?
When I approach coaching testing, I come at it with, I want to encourage this person to have a certain mentality, and I kind of promote a type of detective scientist mentality and approach at teaching that person, because I want them to be able to dig and learn what is in front of them. I want them to be able to dig for the truth about what's going on with this thing in front of them. And I want them to be able to tell me a detailed story about what it is they've just worked on. So I truly believe that testing is learning about the thing in front of you and challenging it, experimenting on it, and analyzing and evaluating it. And I think that being and developing that mentality into that person that I'm paired with, because usually the way I'm teaching these days is I'm paired with and mentoring someone that just came in. Maybe they're a temp, maybe they're just brand new full-timer. So I try to cultivate their mentality and yeah.
Thank you. And Aprajta, how do you coach testing?
So before I go to how I coach testing, a little about my team. Most of the people on my team have never studied coaching. They're scientists or they're bioinformaticians. And so that's a big challenge. But we work in the regulated environment. And so there's a very specific way how people do testing in regulated environments. And so for me, a lot of the times, coaching is really getting away from that, right? So being able to explore. So showing them, hey, don't just follow step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are the other ways that you can really test or like get to understand what or how to break something, or like really use what I call like the diamond eyes, right? Like something that you haven't seen before or something that you haven't thought about yet. So in more of the exploratory side. So a lot of my time around coaching in testing goes in that domain versus trying to say step 1, 2, 3, which is very, very common in my industry.
Thank you. And Ajay, how do you coach testing?
Give the coachee a small exercise and see which method would help them learn quicker in a safe way. When I say safe, in a emotional safety, which would make them give their best to learn that particular skill. It could be like some could learn by games, some could learn by a hands-on exercise, some would want a resource link so that they can go there and watch the video or course. All of this I judge by a small exercise or exercises. And based on that, then it takes that route of, okay, should I give them more of the same stuff or should I change? Because I don't want to get into, let's start the session with X method and then X method needs like 3 hours, but then I have only 1 hour. So I don't do justice either to the X method or have I met their expectations? That question should not be there in my mind. It's always like, okay, what do they need? And let's test it out in 5 minutes. and then proceed based on the time available and their interest.
Thank you. And Bernie, how do you coach testing?
Yeah. I actually want to answer a different question that you didn't ask, if you don't mind. And that is, how do you coach others to deal with testers? Right. So, for example, if I'm working with a development lead or developer or development team, right, and we're all on the same project, and sometimes I need to coach them. I mean, they're brilliant, very smart developers, and they could write code, better than anyone else. But dealing with a QA team or test team might be difficult for them, and so talking with, like James mentioned earlier, having, defining terms. So like when they would say, have you tested this? I said, well, I can, explain exactly what we did, what we didn't do, what the risks are, and give like a full explanation of, can we ship this? I said, well, again, giving full explanations, and then asking them to re-ask their questions to find out exactly what is it that they really want to know. You know what I mean? As opposed to just, getting deeper into what they need, and eventually, after time, they'll start asking what they really are looking for, and the communication bonds get improved, and productivity increases.
Thank you. Okay, so it's an interesting question that Bernie answered that I didn't ask. But that kind of leads us to another question. When you coach, when do you know when to start and when to finish? Because it's obviously not a training where you have a set, the training is, here's the session, here is your answers, here is my feedback on your answers, right? Coaching seems to be more fuzzy, and sometimes it's more direct. So my next question is, when do you start and when do you stop? How do you know that you already coached this person and they can go, or it never happens? And I start with James.
Oh, okay. I'm going to do what Bernie did and subtly change the question. Now that he's known me, he's coached me about that. First of all, I'll give a quick answer to your question, and that is at the beginning of every official coaching session, I ask the student, and I call everyone a student, including myself, by the way. But I ask them, what is it you want to work on? And so they choose what they want to work on, and then we generally go for 90 minutes, and unless they want to go beyond that. So that's a short, quick answer to the question. But there's a related thing in answering that question, and that is a question of safety. And sometimes you need to stop a session when the situation is not safe anymore for either the coach or the person that you are coaching. So you've got to watch that energy, and sometimes you have to call it off. So I have stopped sessions when I felt like I was about to lose my temper with someone who I felt was like doing so badly that I felt like the next thing I'm going to do is start insulting this poor kid, because they are so bad at this and they think they're good at it, but they're bad at it. And so I am not in a good place as a coach. I cannot have that attitude and be a decent coach. So then I have to say something like, well, I don't think I can help you, or go see Bernie, or, something like that. because I know I'm not centered anymore. So the coach always has to stop it in a situation where the coach has lost his center and is no longer in full control of what he's saying and doing. And I hope you ask more questions about safety because there's a lot more to be said about that issue.
Okay, thank you, James. And Josh, when do you start and when do you stop coaching?
I just want to add that I've gone through similar situations, James, and I'm being on the opposite end, and I was being coached, and well, I might have messed up so much that that person wasn't very pleased with it. So that yeah, that I think we've all been there. But what I notice when I'm doing coaching sessions, or let's say I scheduled them, and when I one of the things I pay attention to is the attendance rate. And once I notice that people just are kind of like blowing off my invites, or is being tentative. I guess one of the first signs is tentative. They're just not kind of like jumping on that and immediately accepting the invite. Then I see that, okay, the interest is kind of waning in these coaching sessions. So I'll just send a nice, gentle message out and say, hey, you know, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this coaching content now? I mean, do you feel like you're confident? If they give me an honest answer and say, yeah, you know, Josh, I've already found materials and self-training materials, so I think that I'm good. And when I get the honest answers, then I just say, okay, this concludes it, and we'll revisit again if you need me. I mean, it's a conversation. If people have open conversations, these, you know, it just goes naturally, I think.
Thank you. And Aprajta, how do you start? When do you stop?
So I was, I think, mentioning this earlier. For me, generally, it's based on when I generally follow up with my coaching sessions just to see how that person's doing. It might lead to another impromptu discussion or something else. But it's mostly around when I feel, and even the person, you can see the person who's getting coached, when they've reached a stage, you can see the difference in their confidence. You might even notice, they might tell you something that you had no idea about. And so when I see that level is when I, from my end, say, I think we're done here, in mentally speaking. And the relationship as well. Sometimes the person might come back to you and they might say, I think I've received enough information. And so you need to respect that, even if you feel they are not ready, and that's fine. But thank you, James, for bringing up the safety question. I've been in that situation, and I think didn't realize at the moment that I learned it the hard way. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. And Ajay, when do you start and when do you stop?
So I start when both have the time, mindset, and energy. Because I might not be in a position to coach at that time, but then the coachee wants to learn. Sorry, let's meet some other time. And when do I stop? It's when there is the value curve decreasing for either of us. But if it is just for me, but the coachee or the student is getting value, then I slowly transfer it to someone else who can do a better job at that particular point of time. It could be skill-wise, it could be patience, emotions, language barrier or culture barrier, things like that, or most of the times time zone barrier, right? So stop at that time. When you feel that you're not adding value to the effort you are investing, stop.
Okay, thank you. And Bernie, now you have to answer my question.
I do.
When do you start and when do you stop coaching?
I don't want to answer that question because that question doesn't make sense to me. I don't start and I don't stop. Coaching for me is an outgrowth of what I do. So, throughout my day, I might realize that, oh, there is a learning opportunity, a coaching opportunity that just presented itself, and I'll go for it, and I'll say, hey, guys, or team, do you realize that what just happened here is ... and it's completely related to this idea of XYZ, and the reason why we're doing it is because of so and so and so and so, and why do you think that is? Do you see how it all connects? You know, so it's spontaneous. It's for me, it's a coaching moments spontaneously occur throughout my day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I have a question from the attendee. And Dwayne is asking, what are some good ways to learn how to be a better coach for testing, and how can we learn to do our coaching better? I'll start with James.
I would say practice explaining testing. You have to practice. You have to practice on your dog, on your wife, on anyone who is willing to listen to you. The more I practice explaining testing, I want to say the better I get at it, but I've been at it for 30 years and I still feel like I still need to practice. So it's an ongoing process. So practice explaining testing and you will automatically become better at coaching testing.
Thank you. And Josh, what's good ways to learn how to be a better coach and how to do the coaching better?
I think that one of the best ways to learn how to be a better coach is to, well, think about it from a sense that do unto others as you would have them do unto you. How would this person want to be treated during the session, and how would I expect that treatment also to be reflected back to me? So I feel like patience and having showing a little empathy, thinking about, well, if I'm in this person's shoes, is this something that this topic, is it something that I would love to continue discussing and moving forward with? I think that it's important to have that, and also in terms of like the topic of testing, and it's also, I think personally, very very important to get better and better at explaining testing, but also to really pull out from people's minds like more and more test strategy, creativity, and thinking too. I feel like that's something that people should learn to get better and better at, because we need to be able to pull non-technical and technical folks into our strategies and think about getting better at that as well.
Thank you. And Aprajta, how can we be a better coach and learn to do our coaching better?
So I think coaching, and we've discussed this throughout, right, Anna? So it could be a formal session, or it could be something that's happening spontaneously, or while you just catch it. I think what's most important when you're coaching is also learning from what you just coached. So it's reflection, right? And the student that you're teaching, or the coachee, everyone is different. So every time, even if I'm explaining testing, it might be interpreted very differently by different people. You might learn something in the process. You might even mess up during that process, even if you are at it for 15 years, right? Doesn't matter. So for me, the most important part is reflection, seeing what went well, and especially what didn't went well, and then work on what didn't went well, right? And just be fine with it, like accept it didn't go well, and then work on that, versus like slamming yourself, or like, oh, you should have done better or whatever. But getting better at what you realize you haven't done the best job at as a coach. So reflection.
Thank you. And Ajay, how do we learn how to be a better coach and to do our coaching better?
Right. So there is no one set standard or guideline or a guide for being a better coach. It is very personal, and with different people, your way of coaching would change. So make as many mistakes as possible as early in your coaching career and learn from it. So building upon what AP said, reflection, right? And you can reflect on your sessions only when you have those sessions. So maybe have those sessions for free for people who are not hesitant to point out the mistakes or the way you conducted that coaching session, right? Ensure that you are in a safe zone where you want to try out all of these, and then learn from it, repeat. Because if I can quote the example, how I started this journey and how I became I feel a better coach than what I was previously, was I conducted free testing sessions on Skype for batches of 40 testers every month for like 2 years. And with all of that, I slowly improved. And then I realized what mistakes I did with specific testers and sessions and learn from it, right? So go ahead and do it, and then you will know where you need to improve.
Wait a minute. I have a follow-up question for you, Ajay. Didn't you write a book or something about like my greatest testing mistakes? You do a
Yes,
special thing where you keep track of your mistakes, don't you?
Yeah. So the book name is 50 Plus Mistakes of My Software Testing Career. And I'll just ping the link in the chat. It is at LeanPub.
That's how
leanpub.
that's how professionals do it, my friends.
So this book has a list of all the 50, not all the 50 top 50 mistakes of my career, which I could remember, recollect, and things like that. And the count has increased now. So maybe when it reaches 100, I'll write the second version.
Thank you. And Bernie,
Yeah.
how do we learn to be better coaching?
Yeah. First of all, I'm really glad you just told me about this book. That's fantastic. That's really great. I'm gonna, after this webinar, I'm going to check that out. How do you get better at coaching? I think is how you get better at anything, and that's by doing it, trying it. Like you said, making mistakes, because a mistake is just code word for learning, right? You don't make mistakes, you learn, and that's how you get better at doing anything, including coaching. And I also wanted to say that the one approach or one aspect of trying to get better at coaching, I think, is to get better at finding a balance between two what I think are two opposite forces. And on the one side, honesty, being brutally honest and forthcoming and just radical honesty. On the other hand, being empathetic, sympathetic, kind, friendly. So finding a balance between, giving, maybe having hard conversations, brutally honest, but doing it in a way that's that's helpful but still empathetic and pleasant, right? And finding a balance between that, I think that is a worthy cause of something to try to get better at. And I think doing that will improve your coaching ability.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Why I'm into this conversation, I'm just reflecting of the times that I know you, I observed you, and I think, and I know many of you, and what I think is happening is I'm observing a lot of creativity. And I think that's also a trait of the great coach, being creative, coming up with something new, some ideas, sharing those ideas, never stop. And so I think this is one of the traits everybody notice, because the real coach is always creative. And but I want to come back to what James said about safety. I think in our kind of online, I don't know, way of life, personal way of life, but also being kind of exposed to different means of coaching, and sometimes it could be through text, and sometimes it could be through audio chat, or it's not always personal. And we're talking about the safety. I want to come back to it a little bit because I think it's an important aspect of it. So James, you mentioned safety. Is there any, I don't know, advice or
Yes, I'm very eager.
concerns?
I want to point something out about safety. People may know that there are at least 3 or 4 or maybe 40 people on Twitter that seem to think that I'm a horrible person who bullies other people. So that's important to acknowledge. I have a different point of view, obviously. But what I want to say about safety is that there's 2 approaches, there's 2 ways to think about safety that are important to understand and to ponder. One way to think about safety is to avoid danger. So for instance, if you want to be safe when learning how to fly an airplane, don't try to fly an airplane. Stay away from flying airplanes. Flying airplanes is a way to kill yourself very quickly, and there's no way around that. So just don't fly. But there's another way to think about safety, and that is to learn how to deal with danger, to use safety equipment, to use your skills and knowledge, to have someone there next to you in the aircraft who knows how not to crash the plane. So I learned how to fly. My older brother taught me to fly airplanes. He's an airline pilot in 1991, and I eventually soloed and got to feel like I was a real pilot, which any actual pilot will tell you is just the beginning of learning how to be a pilot. You're a very dangerous pilot. In fact, I almost killed myself on my first cross-country solo flight when I almost taxied onto an active runway when another airplane was about to land right on top of me. And I remembered at the last minute that my brother said, always lean forward and look up out your windshield just before you taxi on, just in case somebody's coming in. And I just saw this other plane landing at this uncontrolled airport. So, I missed out on dying that one time. So what I try to do in my coaching is I don't want to put people in too dangerous a situation with me, but at the same time, I don't want to make it perfectly safe. What I'd rather do is put some pressure, put some tension on them, but not too much. And then I want to give them tools for making themselves as safe as they want to be, to deal with the dangers. I give them phrases that they can tell me when they want me to back off. I try to give them control over me because I know that unlike Bernie and the rest of you, frankly, on this panel, I'm not naturally charming. I'm not naturally mild-mannered. I'm a volatile person, and so I know from long experience that I need to equip my students with the ability to take themselves into a safe zone when they're dealing with me, but it can be very hard for people because sometimes people don't feel that they have the permission to tell me that they need a break, right? So I always have to be very sensitive as I can make myself to give people a break, to remind them of the various safe words that I've told them so that they can deal with the dangers. And I think that's better. It's better to give somebody a way to deal with danger than it is to put them in a playpen like a toddler and carefully avoid giving them any kind of threatening situation.
Thank you. And Josh, how do you deal with safety?
Well, and again, to James's point, I totally understand that there's people who coach differently, and there's people who receive coaching differently as well. And I've dealt with both sides. I've dealt with giving and receiving the coaching, and safety is I guess you have to come to you have to know the person at some level. I guess it's try to understand what this person's about, what kind of personality they are, and try to learn that as quickly as possible. Because I mean, I've in recent experiences, I feel like when you don't, when you're dealing with unknowns with the person you're being coached by or coaching to, it can be a little dangerous when you cross certain lines. So, and then it just falls apart. You don't want it to fall apart. And you don't want this session to go in a direction you didn't want to, or go in a direction that goes into superiors knowing about it or stuff like that. But I just speaking from experience. But I think that to repair that and make sure that you're on track, know in advance the person that you're dealing with, whether you're coaching or being coached. Know in advance, or try to get the people to know the people, and in some way. Little knowledge goes a long way.
Thank you. And Aprajta, how do you deal with the safety?
So, of course, everything that James and Josh said, but I think it's also critical to know yourself, right? So being mindful and conscious of when you are crossing the line. And for me personally, I like to plan and prepare, but it has happened that I have crossed the line in the moment. You're just like heated up or whatever. And with reflection, I also realized it's okay if you did miss on your safety to go back to that person, apologize, and ask how you could have done it better or what you could have not done, right? So you made a mistake. If you cross the safety, better to not cross it. But if you did, it's okay to go accept it and then learn how to do it better so that you don't do it the next time.
Thank you. And Ajay, how do you deal
So
with
I
safety?
feel, so I feel safety is multidimensional. It is not, again, there are like emotional, then you have professional. I mean, we see so many fights online where someone feels they don't feel safe, right? So I would think, or rather, I would focus on the words we use and be consistent. Because if with one person you are talking with a particular set of words, are you sure the other set of people or the other set of community understands the same words in the same manner? If not, clarify. And try to know the person as much as possible, as Josh mentioned. And it is always good to share what you think the coachee can expect in that session. And if you think you're going to cross, sometimes you need to cross the boundaries. And if you think you're going to cross, follow the principle of least regret, which I learned recently from Michael Bolton. What do you regret the least? Getting into a fight or saving that relationship? Thanks.
Thank you. And Barney, safety. Barney, where you are?
Yeah. Sorry, I had myself on mute.
Safe.
Safety. Yeah, I like what AJ just said. Getting clear on definitions and making a decision whether choosing your battles. I guess if this is something that you want to, or you feel you need to dig in, or if it's something that you feel like you can let slide. But again, it is multi-dimensional. When we're talking about safety, it's multidimensional in multiple ways, right? So it's safety for yourself, safety for the other person, safety for, I guess, the context around the interaction. And then there's different kinds of safety, right? I mean, yeah, physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety. If I find myself in a position where I don't feel safe, I'll shut it down and get myself to a place where I feel safe, if I can. So it's, I think there's a lot to it, and I guess I'm still learning myself how to better or how to approach safety in terms of coaching.
Thank you. And yes, never-ending learning is another way that coaches excel at. So we already at the end of our webinar, and I definitely feel that it's a deep topic. I'm so glad that I started it because I learned a lot today as well. But there is much more. So I would appreciate if every panelist would say some departing word of encouragement, anything last that you want the attendees to know. And I will start with James.
Well, it occurred to me during this session that Ajay has recently coached me in a wonderful and effective way. And I realized that I'm going to publish that. I think I'm going to do a blog post showing the exchange on Skype where Ajay complained about a description of a class I was going to give, which I initially reacted somewhat defensively to. And then he did this beautiful coaching move that I decided to respond to. And he ended up helping me make a better class description for a class. The thing is that I'm an expert on writing descriptions of classes. I've been doing this for many years, much longer than Ajay has. And yet he stepped in, coached me on it, and I felt good about that. And I took care of my own safety, and he took care of his own safety, and it all turned out very nicely. So I want people to see that exchange that we had, which was entirely on Skype. So I decided that my final thought is I realized I'm going to publish that now, and it'll be a little coaching lesson by Ajay for us all.
Thank you, James. And Joshua, any parting words, advice for the audience?
Really, I think that, and I want to thank everyone for your input, for your great discussion, and I think that never stop learning is one of those top ones, and also be aware that as you are coaching and being wherever you are in your professional career, you should never stop learning, and you should never stop wanting to learn new things. And even though you are considered a senior, or wherever you are, senior practitioner, or very talented specialist, or you just should never be complacent. Always be hungry. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Aprajta, what's your parting words?
My only piece of advice is actually for managers. So if you're trying to coach somebody you manage, it can get tricky simply because you might be coaching them on something that you're responsible for delivering, and your coaching can soon become something that's not at all coaching. So if you're deliberately trying to coach people who you manage or are responsible for, make sure you realize that, and then you separate those two things out when talking to the individual, but especially for yourself, so that you don't mix them up.
Thank you very much. Very important piece of advice. And Ajay, the last piece of advice for you.
Keep experimenting and focus on the people first, and then the process or the skill. And I tried to come up with a word for each of those letters. Coach. So I could come up with C, communicate, learn to communicate well. O, observe the energy. A, appreciate. Many times people don't appreciate when the coaches do well. They try to find mistakes. So try to balance that as well. And of course, you should come out as a caring person to the coachee. And H, I'm still thinking, or maybe James. Right.
Happiness.
And be ready.
Okay.
H, ensure that everyone is happy at the end of the coaching session, or else it doesn't serve the purpose.
Thank you, Ajay. And Barney, your parting words, word of advice.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have been part of this. I want to take always learn, always be learning. I want to take that a step further. If you're always learning, it means you're always making mistakes. And if you're always, in order to always not always make mistakes, but to learn, you need to make a mistake. And in order to make mistakes, you need to try new things, right? Try things that you haven't done before. Put yourself in situations where that's outside of your comfort zone, and to stretch yourself into new perspectives and new opportunities. Doing that, you are going to make mistakes. You learn from those mistakes, and they become learning opportunities. As you learn, whether it's in testing itself, or in coaching of testing, or in coaching of anything else, that improves your own profile and it improves your capabilities. So that's one idea that I want to give as a takeaway. And again, it was a pleasure to be part of this webinar today.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. I appreciate your time taken to join us, and thank you all the attendees. Recording will be available next week. And please keep in touch. It seems that the panelists are available for coaching one way or another, for advice. Please keep in touch. Keep the momentum going. Thank you all very much.